a former high-priority target in the portal for Mizzou football could very much be back in play. So let's talk about this and more portal chatter right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. On today's program, a little bit of Ryan Wingo chatter that, frankly, I'm just going to bat down immediately here coming up in a little bit. And honestly, this is the most interesting basketball opener coming up in many years, without a doubt. And that and some more football scheduling news as well. Before we start the program, though, I do want to say that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. The terms apply. And according to 24/7 Sports, On 3 Rivals via Gabe DeArmond, things are very much up in the air right now with Simeon Barrow, the former defensive tackle for Michigan State, and a guy who transferred to the University of Miami. Well, at least for now. Apparently, again, in this new world where there basically are no restrictions and rules are very much unknown by even the highest people in this sport right now, apparently Simeon Barrow can do whatever he wants. Now, what this is all about, I have absolutely no true idea, but if I can speculate here a little bit, I do know that Miami has been one of the most aggressive players, just like Mizzou, by the way, but the University of Miami, been a really aggressive player in terms of NIL, in high school recruiting and the transfer portal as well. And as we've seen, we've heard about in various instances here, including a potential lawsuit against Billy Napier and Florida here. Well, sometimes these promised NIL payments don't always come to fruition. So again, this is pure speculation on my part here. But regardless here, we've got three different sources telling us that their sources are saying Simeon Barrow could very much be on the market. And if that's the case, well, Missouri, once again, a very possible landing spot for Barrow. And that's really interesting in a whole bunch of different ways. First of all, really one of the only things that's gone really wrong for Missouri this offseason is a couple of their highest priorities, including Barrow in the portal on the interior defensive line, went elsewhere. So if Barrow is still out there, and all indications are Missouri has been in contact with the young man, hey, that could be a huge get for the Tigers. Definitely interior defensive line. I've focused a lot on corner this offseason, cornerback, of course, in the defensive backfield. But no doubt the interior defensive line and the edge with Darius Robinson, of course, being the highest Tiger taken in the NFL draft. But the interior defensive line lost a lot of really productive players as well. Jaden Jernigan, Josh Landry, among others. I think Chris McClellan, the Florida transfer, I think a lot of people are expecting big things from him. But of course, the way Missouri likes to rotate their defensive linemen, and frankly, the way most everybody in college football likes to rotate their interior defensive linemen compared to the NFL, where you have shorter rosters and teams not playing quite as hyper speed in terms of offense. It's really important to have a rotation of big guys at the SEC level. And as I mentioned on yesterday's program, this is the kickoff of what is a huge high school recruiting month for not only Missouri, but everybody else in the country as well, especially the biggest teams in the Power 5, the Power 4, I guess it is now, with the Pac-12, the Conference of Champions, now joining Bill Walton, unfortunately, in the afterlife. But RIP to Bill Walton as well. Definitely not trying to make light of that. I was a big Bill Walton fan as a broadcaster from my perspective. But regardless, this is a huge month of June for Missouri in official visits. I mentioned Michael Fasusi, ranked as one of the top 20 players in the country consensus, one of a 5-star offensive lineman from the Dallas area. He's going to be making official visits this month. Missouri is the first one. We get the first crack at Fasusi along with Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and the Texas Longhorns as well. I also mentioned Lamont Rogers, another offensive lineman that Missouri is after. Well, one of my YouTube commenters correctly pointed out that with all these offensive linemen that Missouri is heavily recruiting, well, I was a little bit remiss in forgetting to point out Andrew Babalola, who's an offensive tackle from Blue Valley Northwest, just across the Missouri River in Overland Park, Kansas. I mean, he's got some major offers and visits set up as well, including Stanford, Michigan, and Oklahoma. I know the Crimson Tide have been kicking the tires on that young man as well. So Missouri just in on a tremendous amount of offensive linemen right now, on top of already getting a commitment from Jack Lang in the 2025 class, another highly regarded guy and a guy who's been chased after by all kinds of Big Ten schools and Notre Dame teams that are known for putting out quality offensive linemen. So things are trending very well for Missouri. Not only the portal has been nice to Missouri, I'm really thinking, once again, this is going to be the best class when it's all said and done, at least ranked before it's all said and done. Before the games are played, I should say, this is going to be the best class that Missouri has had in the internet rankings era. And when it comes to the 2024 season, we got some fairly significant news here for the upcoming season. Now, I got to say, I found the NFL's approach to releasing the schedule and, I don't know, just all the pomp and circumstance around that the last few years has seemed a little bit silly to me. But wow, it seems like the Southeastern Conference taking it to a whole new level, bringing out piecemeal starting times for the upcoming season. So we do know Missouri is going to kick off on Thursday, the 29th of August at 7 p.m. against Murray State. Well, we also know week 2 against Buffalo, also going to be a night game, a 6 p.m. kickoff against the Buffalo Bills and the Buffalo Bulls. I knew I was going to do that. I always say Buffalo Bills, even though I know it's Buffalo Bulls. Excuse me very much there. But anyway, also the third game of the season, an 11:45 a.m. kickoff against Boston College. And I know we as Missouri fans don't love the 11 a.m. kickoffs, but hey, honestly, I will take that extra 45 minutes. I really will. 11:45 a.m. versus 11 a.m. doesn't feel like that big of a difference. But I promise, when you're trying to get out of the door for an early kickoff and get that extra 45 minutes worth of tailgating for those of us who like to do that, even on an early kick, I'm telling you that does make a slight difference. And I don't know, maybe the SEC, college football to some extent, is taking a page out of Major League Baseball's book, because I have to say I've rather enjoyed the 6:40 first pitches versus 7:10 these days. That accompanied with the pitch clock. Hey, I can actually get in an entire Major League Baseball game, see the ninth inning at a reasonable hour, and actually before I go to bed, hey, not the worst thing in the world. So I think just a slightly later kick there, actually I'm all for it. I think that's a good move by the SEC or Disney or whoever the heck was conspiring here to kick it off 45 minutes later. Frankly, I'm all for it. And the scheduling news is not just limited to football. We know who Missouri is going to play in basketball to open up the 24-25 season in this November. And really, on paper, it's got to be, at worst, the second most interesting team that Missouri has opened up with in, I would say, 25 years or so. So let's talk about that opponent coming up here in just a little bit. But first, you guys know, if you've listened to the show for a long time, you all know I love to golf, and I'm a big advocate. If you're a beginner, just buy in and get some fitted clubs. That will make all the difference in the world. Well, PXG is absolutely the place to do it. I went and swung the PXG Black Ops driver, got fitted for it. Man, that thing just feels so solid in my hands. And by the end of my 1-hour session on their TrackMan simulator, Jacob had me totally dialed in. It was almost hard to hit it offline at a certain point. And not just the driver either. I was really impressed with the one and done and Apache putters, to the point where, gosh, I might just have to buy both of them. Can a man get enough putters? I think not. Well, if you're thinking PXG's high-performance equipment, by the way, is too expensive, well, their clubs are often less than the so-called leading brands. PXG made me a believer, and they'll do the same for every golfer in Kansas City. Visit pxg.com/LockedOnMizzou to schedule your fitting at PXG Kansas City. It's at 7517 West 119th Street in Overland Park. Get fitted for any club and you'll get a dozen golf balls free. That's pxg.com/LockedOnMizzou to schedule your fitting. pxg.com/LockedOnMizzou. Limit 1 dozen golf balls per person. Promotion ends June 30th. Other terms and conditions may apply. See store for details. And after my PXG fitting, what better way to end the day than with some Royals baseball, courtesy of Gametime. And since I needed some last-minute tickets, of course I went to Gametime. They always give you the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you with 110% of the difference. Great seat views, panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. I always toggle the all-in pricing so you know exactly what you're getting. When I saw the $73 for what I thought were really, really premium tickets, hey, I jumped on it immediately, was really happy with the entire experience. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So in the return game of last season's, well, frankly, a beatdown by the Memphis Tigers of our Missouri Tigers in Mizzou Arena, Missouri is going to tip off next season against Memphis November 4th, the opening night of the college basketball season, by the way, at the FedEx Forum in Memphis, just off Beale Street. So a really interesting opener there for the Tigers, and something that's highly, highly unusual, certainly at least in recent Mizzou basketball history. I mean, if we're just talking about the post-Norm Stewart era, starting with the 99-2000 Missouri Tigers, well, that was Quinn Snyder's first year, and he started off his campaign with a loss to the Wisconsin Badgers. Obviously, Wisconsin, a pretty ballyhooed basketball program, a Big Ten program. Well, more often than not, the Tigers are kicking off the season with somebody like Central Arkansas, or Arkansas Pine Bluff, or Prairie View A&M, or some similarly uninspiring team that's not going to exactly draw a lot of fans or eyeballs outside of opening night curiosity. So I do think it's interesting and certainly compelling that Missouri is going to have a real game on its hands to start the season. Also a drivable game as well. I've attended a Memphis Grizzlies game at the FedEx Forum. Definitely a fun place to watch basketball, a fun atmosphere. So would be interesting to maybe head down there just off Beale Street again, like I said, next season. Now, again, an opener against a major opponent like this, certainly Memphis, I would consider a high major basketball program. Yeah, they're in the American Conference. Okay, regardless, I would consider Gonzaga a high major program as well, despite the conference that it currently resides in. So, really, other than Wisconsin, again, in Quinn Snyder's opening game of his Missouri career and his head coaching career, quite honestly, well, really only Iowa State, the famous Michael Porter Jr. opening game. That's the only high major competition that Missouri's actually opened with. That was back in the 17-18 campaign. Well, really the only two other memorable openers from Missouri basketball over the last 25 years or so in the post-Norm era. Well, sadly, UMKC beating Missouri in Kim Anderson's first game as Missouri's basketball coach. A 69-61 loss there was certainly a harbinger of things to come. Also, Missouri in the 2003-2004 season opened up at Oakland, by the way. That team, which was very much ballyhooed, a top 10, top 15 type of outlet, or type of program, I should say, in the preseason, barely beat Oakland 90-85 in the opener. Again, a harbinger of a team that wasn't quite as good as we thought, in particular on the defensive side of the ball, giving up 85 points to Oakland in the opener. Who scheduled that game for Missouri's opener? I'm really not sure. If you're going to open up on the road, at least make it against an interesting opponent like Memphis in an NBA arena that may well sell out, at least get 10, 12,000 people in there, you've got to think. So with Penny Hardaway at the helm with Missouri, hopefully wanting to come back, have a good season, just a maybe 2.5, 3 hour drive from St. Louis, that kind of deal. So hopefully an exciting opener for Missouri and Memphis next season. Definitely an unusual one, no question about that. And you know what? Since I did tease Ryan Wingo in the graphic here on YouTube, lockedonmizzou.com, of course, you can always find your pertinent links to YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. But I have just seen a few Missouri fans, including ones who have commented and tweeted at me saying, hey, is there some smoke here with Ryan Wingo? Because, well, for one thing, Texas might be getting two of the top three receivers in the upcoming 25 high school recruiting class. Well, to that, I would say, number one, before we even get to the idea that, well, Ryan Wingo, he might be backing out of Texas. Hey, with the Simeon Barrow stuff that I talked about at the top of the program, clearly anything is possible. And rules, etiquette, all that good stuff seems to be completely out the window in college football. But I would question, first of all, does Eli Drinkwitz in Missouri, would they even want to reignite the flame there with Ryan Wingo? Even if he did ask out of Texas, would Drinkwitz and company still be interested? Because it seemed like Wingo really pulled the rug out from under Missouri when he announced his decision this past fall. It seemed like everybody thought that, at least around Missouri, thought that Wingo, by all indications, was going to be a Tiger. Well, he pulls the rug out at the last minute, goes to Texas, which is, of course, his right. I just feel like maybe Missouri felt like, maybe this ship has sailed and we didn't have quite the relationship with this young man that we thought. But really, more to the point, you go back and you look at what happened in the Texas spring football game. Well, guess what? Ryan Wingo had over 80 yards and a touchdown in that game, and his head coach Steve Sarkisian was talking him up, saying he looked great and all that good stuff. This was as a true freshman early enrollee, by the way. The guy's already looking pretty productive in the spring game. So is Ryan Wingo going anywhere? I don't think so. And speaking of no rules, or at the very least making the rules up as we go along, well, two of the most powerful people in the SEC sure seem to agree with me. Just in case you thought I was overreacting on yesterday's program to all this cataclysmic change in college football and basketball that continues to be foisted upon us, let's talk more about the big picture, what Hugh Freeze had to say, and more right after these words. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. We are free wherever you get podcasts, including the SiriusXM app. And hey, I brought up early first pitches. Well, the St. Louis Cardinals are in Philadelphia tonight. First pitch, 5:40. You can find it on the SiriusXM app or on channel 176 on your radio dial. Royals also taking on a National League club, the Padres, at home tonight, channel 175 or on the SiriusXM app. So let's talk about some more legal fallout because this stuff just seems like it's never ending at this point. I guess I need to go back to Mizzou to get my law degree to truly figure out what's happening. But you know what? I think I'll just mostly stick to football and basketball. So we're just going to end with a little bit more of legal talk here. Well, another bit of news yesterday, as it's basically been confirmed that free transfers are here. This has more or less been confirmed anyway. Very, very seldom does a school actually challenge anybody's ability to transfer at this point. But again, also just some big-time names meeting in Florida here recently in the SEC the last couple days. And, well, coming out of these meetings, big reason for this, of course, as I discussed yesterday, a landmark case settled by the NCAA and its plaintiffs that basically says, hey, revenue sharing in terms of the TV dollars, in terms of tickets sold, that type of thing, well, that's going to be available and shared with the players from now on. Long story short. But again, as I said yesterday, all the lawyers who, of course, probably are going to make $100 million literally in lawyers' fees over this. So, of course, they're thrilled, and they're ballyhooing this decision as a landmark thing and just, wow, isn't everything honky-dory? But the reality is, even how this is all going to be doled out to Division I athletes over the last 10 years or so seems very unclear. How exactly this affects Title IX also is murky, to say the least. And of course, coming out of 2 days of meetings, well, Hugh Freeze, Auburn's coach, basically put his hands up in the air and said, I have absolutely no idea what we're supposed to do with any of this. Kentucky's president said it even more bluntly, basically saying that there are no rules at this point. Let me get his exact quote here. In fact, he said, I used to often say, tell me the rules and I'll live by them. Well, we don't know the rules. So in case you thought I was being dramatic yesterday, if anything, I was underselling it. But at the same time, it doesn't exactly give me warm fuzzies as a college football fan to know that, hey, even the highest ranking people, the coaches, the presidents of universities, even they're throwing up the old shrug emoji at this point. And finally, one more Missouri note here as, well, this is actually an NFL-related note, but a couple Missouri tangentially related people here. Number one, you've got the former Missouri strength coach, Dave Tobe, who is now the special teams coordinator and has been for, I believe, the entire tenure of Andy Reid in Kansas City. But Dave Tobe, again, formerly with Mizzou, special teams coordinator, saying that maybe Justin Reid, the Kansas City Chiefs starting safety, could be kicking off this season. Now, the new NFL kickoff rules, without going too deeply into it, basically it's discouraging touchbacks and encouraging teams to try to land that ball between the goal line and the 20-yard line. So in other words, a premium on having the incredibly strong leg off the tee for kickoffs is no longer the case. To the point where the Chiefs, who are taking Justin Reid, a guy who in an emergency situation has place kicked effectively for the Chiefs before, well, they want him in there on tackles. They're saying that, hey, we've watched the XFL. This is basically a copy of the XFL's kickoff rules. A lot of times that kicker is in on the play, either actually making a tackle or getting in a tackling lane and at least making somebody cut back. So the Chiefs are saying, hey, we don't want Harrison Butker, our, our obviously our really valuable kicker that we've had for years here. We don't want him risking himself to injury. So we're thinking about putting Justin Reed in there. Now, I had been saying, hey, this whole thing helps Harrison Mevis. His kickoff abilities is probably the biggest question he has. It's not really a place kicking question with Harrison Mevis. So I had been saying, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if you see the punter in there handling this play. Well, I have to admit, I had not considered that, wow, they might actually use real position players who may have some kicking experience here, real defenders. That's an interesting wrinkle I had not yet thought about. But to my point, my original point all these months ago, this absolutely helps Harrison Mevis. Whether it's making the Carolina Panthers or another squad, he's going to have his opportunities here in the preseason to prove what he's worth. So, I don't know. I just enjoy the big picture stuff, talking about that a lot of times. Hopefully you enjoyed it as well. Thanks for joining me, as always, here on Locked On Mizzou. I will see you all next week. We're going to be entering off-season mode. We've just finished up with May. So officially here for June and July, going to be in off-season mode. Expect 3 podcasts a week for the next couple months before we crank it back up to 5 a week in August. So until next time, I'm John Miller, and this has been Locked On Mizzou.